Chapter 151, Agakeros used hidden power. Raw link, January 15, 2017, translator, Tumorfreethoughts/TPSTT, January 28, 2020, editor 1, Hand of Vecna, March 18, 2020, editor 2, Key, March 21, 2020, translation link, ___ I hope everyone has been staying well and healthy in this tough time and will continue to be so. All the best to everyone. Notice 1. There were repeated messy edits after the publication of Chapter 140, so here is the summary for those who read it shortly after it was released. We have retrospectively made edits and have settled with Astrius, Chapter 134, and Ganymedes, Chapter 139 and 140, over Astrion and Ganymede. They are just a spelling variant and are supposed to be the same person in the lore. We have chosen this spelling over the other because the Ross have used Astrius and Ganymedes. Apologies for the inconvenience. Notice 2, t.i.tle for numerous chapters have been changed to match the Pokemon theme. Too numerous to list here, but it is listed on Discord. ______ from Agakeros's, Pisces's, and Sagittarius's bodies, power welled up in an explosive manner. As their master, Rupas, Serpa.s. said the limits, their levels were also pulled up in the process, allowing them to reach the height of level 1000 after breaking past the level 800 wall. The difference in level was not something that could be shrugged off and ignored. As a matter of fact, the higher the number A.S. associated with the level, the more important the difference in level became. For example, even if an individual's level was to be double that of another person's, if they were level 1 and level 2, then there was not a monumental difference between them. Needless to say, even a difference in one level could not be looked upon lightly. However, there was still a not insignificant chance that the level 1 individual could end up winning against the level 2 individual. But if the doubling of the numerical value described a level 10 and a level 20, then the difference between the two of them would not be overturned by normal means. Furthermore, if the doubling was describing a level 100 and a level 200, then the difference between the two of them would be definitive and conclusive. Between the 12 stars and the evil G.O.D, the level difference was 200. Even when compared to Libra, there was a level difference of 90. There was a definitive difference in ability born out of those 200 levels. And after Agakeros and the others had instantly covered the gap, the evil G.O.D must have sensed the abnormality. Even without exchanging words, it no doubt must have understood that. Just now, the scale which was barely maintaining the balance fatally tipped in its enemy's favor. Now then, let's finish this, mutated one. Out of respect for your strength, I will show you all that I've got to give. Look carefully at the real appearance of the Devil King Agakeros. 1. Removing the level restriction signified that the 12 stars would be able to display their original power that they were otherwise unable to show. In the past, Agakeros was called the Devil King of Helheim and was feared by others. Lifting his level restriction meant that he would be released from the shackles which were binding him. The goat's eyes shone red whilst his wings flattered about. His real physical body, the body of the old gentleman, which had been at the feet of the illusion until this point, disappeared and completely merged with the illusion that had been created by him. That was not all. All the mana in the surroundings were gathering into one point with him as the center. It was the same as what Mercurius had done at Dropnir. Return to me. Power of darkness. The black mana that was being absorbed by Agakeros caused the illusory body to materialize into a tangible one. The lower body, which had looked like a fish until this point, changed into legs covered in hair. At the same time, the giant body, which had had a height of approximately 100 m, became bigger and bigger, eventually Serpa.s. 1 kilometer, yet even then, it continued to grow bigger. The whole of Midgard was covered in darkness and lightning flashed about everywhere whilst the whole world trembled in fear due to the materialization of the Devil King. The evil G.O.D was grasped by the Devil King's hand all while the head of the goat pierced the clouds and reached the stratosphere. If, at this time, someone were to look at Midgard from S.P.A.ce, they would have doubted what they were seeing. That was because they would have seen something sprouting out of Midgard, a gigantic devil goat the size of a planet. Agakero's Full Power Illu.S. Tration from Volume 7 Light Novel, Agakero's True Power Goodbye, Mutated 1. If it's you, you may be able to survive after receiving my next attack, but you will never be able to come back to this planet. This world is the possession of my master. Having said that, you are also someone who has the makings of a king. As someone who is also a devil, this Agakeros shall recognize and concede that fact more than anyone else. Agakeros by no means disliked the mutant God. If anything, Agakeros felt that the evil G.O.D was the one and only comrade of his in this world. The evil G.O.D was not something that was phony or counterfeit like the demon race. It was a true devil. How could Agakeros hate something or someone like that? If Rupa's Mafal had not existed, he would not have minded dividing the world and sharing half of it with it. He had honestly thought of and recognized his enemy as such. However, this world already had a black-winged king. The rightful king who would rule over the world already existed. As was the case, there was no longer any room for this mutant G.O.D to linger around. There was no longer any room for Agakeros to allow it to continue existing. After all, there could only ever be one rightful king. And there could only ever be one devil who could serve that one rightful king. That was himself, Agakeros. If you manage to stay alive, your attempt to reign supreme should be done in some other world's land. Agakeros flung his arm, throwing the evil G.O.D into empty S.P.A.ce. At the same time, as a last-ditch effort, the evil G.O.D also activated a special skill. When it did, with the evil G.O.D as the center, the world around it was rapidly rewritten. Midgard, which should have been under the rules and limitations put in place by the G.O.Dis, was repainted with alien laws. What it changed to was a dream that he had been seeing. The reality was repainted with his dream, attempting to invert everyone's madness and sanity. The laws governing the maximum damage were negated. Even the laws which governed the maximum level one could reach were negated. The evil G.O.D created a world which was not bound by the G.O.Dis's laws, resulting in a place where he was not restrained, a place where he would be able to exhibit his true ability. But it was just a bit too late to show his hand. Agakeros was not as easygoing as to wait for the evil G.O.D's erosions to complete. Not only that, as the erosion had implicated even Agakeros, the constraint on Agakeros's level was nullified, allowing him to Serpa.S the maximum level of 1000 and reach 1350. Agakeros, who had gained an increase in power after Serpa.S seeing the limits, opened his mouth and started gathering an astronomical amount of mana. Seeing this, the evil G.O.D attempted to dodge it. However, he was caught and held in place by Pisces's fangs, who had turned his body into an Ouroboros form. Just like that, the evil G.O.D was flung around using raw physical might and was finally launched away. Disappear. A destructive ray was fired from Agakeros's mouth. This destructive ray was a perfect coalescence of the brightness of a star and endless and eerie darkness. A bright dark light, a term all too contradictory within itself, directly hit the evil G.O.D and in a single moment, blew its body to the far end of the void in an instant. There was no technique that the evil G.O.D could use to avoid the attack. It was simply impossible for the evil G.O.D to escape from the extremely powerful attack that Agakeros had used. To top things off, an arrow imbued with the skill El Nassel, which ignored the distance between the user and target to absolutely hit the target, was added to the mix. As a result, the two rays spiraled around each other to create a helix, strengthening and reinforcing each other, sending the evil G.O.D far, far away. And although this was a story from the future, from a few years later, or perhaps a few dozen years, or even a few hundred years into the future, this ray of light continued to carry the evil G.O.D without disappearing across a few light-years worth of distance, or perhaps a few dozen light-years worth of distance, or even a few hundred light-years worth of distance. Past the star system, past the galaxy, and eventually, PAS.sing even the galaxy group. Just as literally as it was written, the evil G.O.D was being sent out of the world that they were in. As for where he might end up at the end, or what might end up happening to the evil G.O.D, Agakeros did not know. Perhaps at the end of it all, the evil G.O.D might reach a place where it might be wars.H.I plus PPED as an outer G.O.D2. Perhaps it would end up on a planet devoid of any living creatures and gain peace on that land. Whichever the outcome, Agakeros and the others were only sure of one thing. And it was that it was not an Ent.I.Ti which would die from something of this degree. Just that. Even going into the future, the evil G.O.D would continue to live and survive somewhere out in S.P.A.ce just like themselves. And that, they would never cross paths with each other ever again. With that conviction in mind, Agakeros felt it to be all too unfortunate. Eventually, Agakeros dispersed the mana and returned to his usual size. At this time, Pisces came up to Agakeros whilst cold sweating and spoke up. I guess it's to be expected of the Devil King of Helheim. The only one amongst the 12 stars to be regarded as dangerous by Rupa-sama and tamed for the purpose of sealing you. Agakeros was different from the other 12 stars. Although it had previously been stated, due to his cruel disposition, he alone was regarded as dangerous by Rupas. As a consequence, he was tamed by Rupas so that he could be placed under her supervision. 3 It was because Rupas had concluded that, had he been left alone, he would become a terror to the humanoids of a magnitude higher than that of the demons. Furthermore, to have him serve under her meant that the great devil known as Agakeros would be shackled under a level restriction such that his true abilities would be placed under a seal. Not even that Lion King Leon could secure this much of a sense of danger out of Rupas. The strongest individual amongst the 12 stars was Leon. There would be no one who would raise an objection to that statement. However, the most sinister and atrocious out of the 12 stars was, without a doubt, the Devil King Agakeros. In addition, the birth of the Great Devil was something not even the G.O.D had predicted would happen. He was a monster which was naturally born outside of the G.O.D scenario. That was why Agakeros called himself a true devil. That was why he wars.H.I plus PPED and respected Rupas, who was similarly operating outside of the G.O.D scenario, yet possessed power far greater than himself. Had that not been the case, it was a possibility that, by this time, this great devil would have enveloped Midgard in darkness and deprivation. Even though you have that much power, you're content to be under a seal and not attempt to reign supreme yourself. I can't believe someone like that really exists. There is only ever one true king. Our Blackwing Supreme Ruler, and she alone. If she so requires, I will gladly subject myself to death or be placed under a seal. That is my loyalty. How humble. Pisces sneered, then noticed that he was feeling a sense of relief within himself. This late in time, he was feeling fortunate that this devil was not egocentric like Leon. The very fact that this demon had been spellbound by Rupas was perhaps the greatest fortune Midgard had encountered. Ordinarily, he acted like a man with a few screws loose in his head. Nevertheless, the occasional display of his true nature as a devil made Pisces S.H.I plus ver. Either way, this time, the problem has been solved. Eros, IA.S.Sum, you will come with us now. Well, first I need to PAS.S my position over. After that, I'll accompany you guys. Also, don't call me Eros. Alright, best regards from now on, Eros. I said don't call me Eros. We'll count on you, Pisces. Shut up, transforming horse. Die. 4. On the way back to the palace, Pisces loosened his lips whilst making sure Libra and the rest could not see him smile. Even after 200 years of time, they were still the same old bunch of weirdos that he remembered. However, he was strangely happy about that. Whilst he would never tell them this, he actually really enjoyed having those back and forth exchanges. Notwithstanding that, it was his honest desire that they would call him Pisces. It seems Libra and the others safely managed to meet with Pisces. After opening the letter, I rested my back on the S.H.I plus P's pillar. There were 2 messages. One of them had just arrived a few dozens of seconds ago with the request to activate Alkaid. Apparently, there was a troublesome enemy that even they were struggling against. As a result, they requested the activation of Alkaid so that their limiters would be removed. Honestly speaking, this request had surprised me. After all, I had not expected for a moment that there would be a monster at a caliber that even the combination of Libra, Agacaros, Sagittarius, and Pisces would still struggle against. The second letter was there to let me know that the monster had been ejected out into S.P.A.C.E and that Pisces had been retrieved. Although in regard to that, I knew about it even without receiving the letter. After all, I was able to see Agacaros's giant form even from where I was. Or rather, in all likelihood, he could be seen by everyone regardless of where they were. Anyhow, I wondered if Agacaros had actually possessed such a skill before. He got so big that it was like a joke at this point. Perhaps he could destroy a planet without even breaking past the level restriction? That was pretty impressive, eh? I previously called him a pet and made him out to be a fool, but if it's that guy, even I might be in danger. Stop being modest, Bennett. If it's a direct confrontation, you'd almost certainly win. I sneered in response to Bennett saying that she might end up losing against him even though she did not truly think so in her heart. Indeed, Agacaros in that state could even make me feel a sense of threat, notwithstanding, Bennett was still superior to him. If it came down to a punching contest, that large body of Agacaros would only work against him as Bennett would be able to rapidly and continuously punch him at her will. Eventually, he would be blown to pieces by the maiden who fires the silver arrow. Or rather, Bennett was so strong that it was not even funny. But really, what happened was such a waste. Although I only saw it for the briefest moment of time, the weird and grotesque monster which was sent flying by Agacaros was level 1000. Its HP was 2.8 million, meaning it was higher than that of Leon's. Whilst it would be weakened if I tamed it, given how strong it was, I wanted to have it under my control. It would have served as a good durable wall. Oh, I supposed in that case, Karkinos would lose his standing. By the way, where do you plan to go next? After being prompted by Bennett, I closed my eyes and considered what to do for a moment. At this moment in time, we were pursuing Dina who had gone missing. However, even at this point, we had yet to ascertain her whereabouts. We had tried checking places that she might have gone to, such as Moffel Tower, but we were unable to find even a single clue. With how things were developing, our only option was to go to a location which was slightly dangerous. For example, like the Demon King's place. I opened my eyes, made my decision, then voiced that out loud. Let's go to the Demon Race's castle. Bennett reacted to my words by smiling and baring her fangs. In all likelihood, the one who was most familiar with Dina was the Demon King. The reason was because he was aware of Dina's spy activities. In other words, he had acquiesced in regard to her ident.I.T as Venus. Of course, it might very well have been possible that he had simply not noticed anything whatsoever. However, given his position as the ruler of the demon race, that would have been far too negligent on his part. Furthermore, I felt that he was in possession of information that I was still unaware of. It did not seem like a bad idea for us to speak to each other once, candidly. In the worst-case scenario that things got dangerous, it would all be fine if I ran away. Interesting. You mean to settle things with them after 200 years of time? Well, it all depends on how the other party responds. I don't really have the intention to rile things up from my side. Naturally, since it was called the Demon Race's castle, there was probably bound to be a lot of demons and magical beasts. But honestly speaking, the number of enemies did not really matter. Even if there were tens of thousands, no, even if there were hundreds of millions of enemies, it was all meaningless against me. Indeed, under the theory of war, the amount of available resources was a factor which could directly determine the outcome of war. Nevertheless, I was well beyond the level where such things mattered. However many enemies were gathered, what was impossible would remain impossible. As an extreme A.N.A. It was something like telling a person that there was a nuclear missile coming their way and to gather tens of thousands of unarmed ordinary humans and order them to do something about it. In the end, it would simply be impossible. Well, against the small fries, if I casually intimidated them with coercion, the problem would be solved. Alter the course. The new destination, the Dark Continent. Head to the Demon King's castle. When I relayed my order, the Argonautai started moving without me having to put in any additional HA.S.SLE, and changed the course of the journey. Now then, will an ONI or a snake come out? Will we draw good luck or bad luck? 5 As for what's to come. Well, I suppose, we can only go with the flow. Author note, VS Mutant G.O.D arc has now concluded. Aegocaros, who had been acting the role of the goat which bites, has finally displayed his disposition as the Devil King. The Goat-san in his serious mode can become as big as a planet. He is strong, convinced. Well, to be fair, until this point, he was in an unfortunate position of always losing, notwithstanding that he looked intimidating. So I wanted to show how strong he actually was. Next time, it will be our protagonist's turn. Having said that, in addition to Ruppaz who has absurd fighting prowess, we currently even have Bennett. So it probably won't be that hype. Q. What is going to happen to the evil G.O.D-san from now on? A. Because he is being sent flying faster than the speed of light, he will go back to the past. Furthermore, he will crash into a black hole and be sent to another universe. He will then continue to be sent flying until he eventually lands safely on the Earth. Author note end, __1 Ra is just Mo, so it could just be the Demon King Aegocaros. For now it's written as Devil King because he was introduced in this way. 2. The outer G.O.ds are the cosmic end.I.tes of the Thulhu mythos. However, Thulhu is generally considered a great old one, instead of an outer God. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/thulhu_mythos_deities #outer_G.O.ds. 3. First mentioned in chapter 67, he was not recruited into the 12 heavenly stars because of his strength. It was because he was too dangerous. If he was not controlled by Ruppaz, he would become a terror to the humanoids of a magnitude higher than that of the demons. Translation by Vecna. Also refer to chapters 35, 96, etc. 4. So this is a pun. The term transformation or abnormal or metamorphosis used here is written as hentai. Hentai can also mean sexually perverted. So when Pisces said transforming horse, it has the double meaning of transforming and perverted horse. 5. Literally translated as would it be an ONI or snake that comes out, is a popular J.A. Payne's idiom. The second part is, literally translated above. Both are pretty self-explanatory, but in English, the closest equivalent would be like saying, now then, shall we see if everything goes well or not, after rolling a dice and hoping something favorable ends up happening. ONI is a creature from J.A. Payne's folklore. See footnote 3 of chapter 127 for picture. I didn't translate it as demon since we already have demons in this series. The second part is actually referring to a draw of the luck at J.A. Payne's shrines and temples. It's similar to fortune cookies, but it gives a paper with your luck. You can check out Omikuji for more details. Chapter 152, A Demon Used Thunder, 1 Raw link, January 21, 2017, translator, Tumorfreethoughts/TPSTT, January 30, 2020, editor 1, Hand of Vecna, March 23, 2020, editor 2, Key, March 27, 2020, translation link, ____________. We ended up finding the Demon King's castle very quickly. Or rather, the Argonautai had apparently long identified the location of the castle. Well, I supposed after flying around with Castor for 200 years, it made sense for them to have at least searched out the enemy's base of operations. Even in the Dark Continent, it was a wasteland which was particularly dense with mana. In the midst of this wasteland soared a cliff with an enormous black castle on top. Indeed, its majestic and dignified appearance really screamed, I am the last dungeon. There was a large number of scary-looking magical beasts flying about and patrolling the surrounding area. Furthermore, dark clouds obstructed the sunlight to keep the place under a perpetual night. Thunder resounded along with lightning flashes, creating an eerie atmosphere. If anything, this castle is way too much of a stereotype that, lately, you actually don't see much anymore. Also, I think about it every time I see these kinds of castles, but, if you collapse the cliff from the outside, wouldn't the castle drop down and kill all the small fries in one go? I mean, I'm not going to do that, but why is it that Demon King's castles are always situated on an unstable place like the edge of a cliff or some precipice? Isn't it just so inconvenient? Or rather, honestly speaking, it's a type of building that I would not want to live in. Actually, it's that, you know. I just genuinely want to ask, why is there a castle casually standing in the middle of nowhere even though this place isn't even the capital? Since he's a king, I assume that he would naturally be sustaining himself on the tax money from his citizens. But with where this castle is, it must have been quite a sle for the person bringing in that tax money. Build the cities closer to your castle. Well, I can't say much to others because of Moffel Tower. So, what now? Do you want to shoot it down from the outside? Nah, no need to rush. We didn't really come here to cause conflict. As long as they don't come attacking us, there shouldn't be a need for us to do anything to them. Having said that, I'm not really liking this dark and dull setting. I looked up at the sky and casually fired arcane magic at it. It was only low-tier arcane magic, however, considering that it was just to scatter the clouds, it was more enough. As a result of my single attack, the cowardly clouds quickly flew away and the blue sky expanded in all directions, allowing the sunlight to s.h.i+ne through. Good, now it's bright. I'm sorry that they went to great trouble to look like the last dungeon, but I like it better when it's bright. Whilst thinking such a thing, Bennett glared at me as if she had something to say. Oh, crap. I forgot that she disliked the daytime. She snapped her finger, turning day into night in an instant and making the whole place shrouded in darkness once again. Moon attribute arcane magic moonlit night, huh? She really did just use high-tier arcane magic without any additional movement as if it's the most normal thing in the world. Oi, Bennett. Stop yapping. Let's go. Even though the weather just turned fine, it reverted back in an instant. When I figured that I would complain a bit, Bennett started progressing forward without minding it in the slightest. It seemed she wanted to just boldly walk right in from the front. I supposed it would be unnecessary and seem bad for the two of us to look for a backdoor to sneak in. Therefore, I was also in favor of boldly walking in from the front. As we closed in on the castle, the magical beasts in the surroundings all came flying at us. However, the moment Bennett turned to look at them, they all instantly turned pale and ran away. Bennett did not possess any intimidation skill, yet they must have instinctively felt that they were going to die. In fact, it was an excellent decision on their behalf. If they had progressed 1 more meter, no, even if they had progressed half that distance, they would no doubt have been shredded into pieces too. Once we reached the front of the castle, what was in our way was a giant steel door. For some reason, its height was over 10 long. It was big enough that even a giant could utilize the door. Normally, this was the part where we would need to present some item or find some method to open the gate. But that whole part was irrelevant for us. Bennett simply placed her hand on the gate and forcibly wrung the gate open using nothing but her arm strength. Lock? Ah, if you're asking about that, she twisted and grinned it in an instant. Perhaps it was made out of tofu or something. 4wh, what, how can it be? To open that gate with her bare hand. That gate was made out of steel, you know. That door should have a weight of 50 tons. Is she a monster? Okay, thanks for that exposition right there. I lightly applied coercion on the bunch of pale-looking people on the other side of the gate, forcing them down on the ground. You lot, don't move from there, all right? If you move even a little, you'll be crushed by Bennett. When we stepped through the gate, as one would expect, demons which were guarding the place started flooding out, but however many of them there were, it was all meaningless. You're in my way. Get lost. There, I increased the pressure from my coercion. The warriors who were wearing heavy-looking armor all fell down to the ground as if they were being pushed down and became unable to move. The two of us brushed past them and looked around the inside of the castle, which was needlessly s.p.a.sias. We were currently in a reception hall, but unfortunately, there were far too many routes that we could take. There were 3 routes on each side of us leading to who knows where, totaling to 6. Directly in front of us, there were stairs, but there were additional doors on each side of them. If one were to climb the stairs for a bit, they would see a portrait of the Demon King as the stairs split to the left and right, both of which further split again into 4 paths each, totaling to 8 paths. At this point, there were already 16 different possible routes. Additionally, if we were to take any of those paths, they were bound to further split into paths leading to the guards' rooms, kitchens, training room, and etc. The whole place was constructed similarly to a typical RPG's last dungeon. But honestly, heroes must really be tolerant to actually bother finding the boss patiently in a troublesome castle like this whilst encountering enemies. There's a needlessly high number of paths, Bennett muttered as if she was sled by all of this. Indeed, to search all of the paths one at a time was too much of a bother. To have the castle constructed in this way, was it perhaps due to a vigilance or precaution against enemy infiltration? I had previously heard somewhere that facilities like this were purposefully built in this way so that even if enemies were to infiltrate, they would not be able to immediately reach their intended location. It looks like it's going to be a bit of a HA.S.SLE to actually search ourselves. I guess we'll make this guy guide us. Bennett randomly selected a single demon amongst the ones which were sitting on the floor and grabbed him by his neck. The pitiful demon with a Mohican haircut which was selected shook violently in fear and was sobbing his heart out. Although he was my enemy, I did feel a little sympathy for him. Having said that, I was also in support of the idea of using a guide. IA.S.Sum, you know where the Demon King is? If you guide us to him, I promise that we'll let you go. So can you tell us where he is? Why, yes. Gladly. Whilst asking for the path, Bennett and I continued to progress forward through the complex structure of the castle. We progressed straight, we turned, we ascended some stairs, we descended some other stairs, we went through some doors, we then climbed some more stairs and... Hang on a minute, this is way too complicated. Is this a maze or something? After walking for a little over 10 minutes, Bennett's irritation had clearly significantly intensified, such that she was visibly annoyed. Oi, when are we going to get there? Why, yes. If we go straight through here, we'll be there. Saying that, the location that the guide was pointing to was a path where the trail cut off. Below that place, a countless number of needles were placed along with scattered bones which IA.S.Summed belonged to those who were caught by the trap. This road has a mechanism where someone needs to pull the lever here or it can't be PAS.said. I will keep the lever pulled, so please PAS.S through. Why is it that the insides of the last boss's castles always have these kinds of attractions? It's not like they're theme parks. Wouldn't gimmicks like this just be troublesome under ordinary conditions? It's probably that, you know. It's probably one of those traps designed to make sure that someone from the party gets struck out even before arriving at the last battle's location. When the person who was guiding us pulled the lever into place, a bridge appeared from the other side and connected the path. Well, it was a distance that we could have easily jumped across, but we might as well accept the chivalrous act. Whilst thinking that, the moment we started crossing the bridge, the guide pressed some B.U.T.ton, instantly sending an electric current running through us. Hiya ha 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 ha. Idiots. You got caught so gullibly. These currents are 1 billion volts and 500,000 amperes. It doesn't matter how strong your body is, you'll turn into ash in an instant. I've done it, Demon King Sama. This great servant have struck down the supreme ruler and the vampire princess. The guide was hyperactively laughing in joy for some reason. But I only felt pity for him. Indeed, this trap would have killed ordinary people, but unfortunately, we were anything but ordinary. 1 billion volts is what? Approximately the same as a live lightning strike? Well, if you asked if it was amazing, I supposed it was, but, if it was just lightning, an individual who could use high-tier arcane magic could spam it. We were in that kind of a world right now, you know? Even in ordinary fantasy worlds, lightning strikes were often casually dropped on people, and the people who received them could often casually counterattack, you know. 5. Not to mention this was a fantasy world where the power balance was completely out of whack. I didn't even know how he thought we would be taken down by something of this degree. I shrugged to show my exasperation and Bennett similarly let off a sigh. Yet the electric current was still running. Looks like, this is their reply. Well, I predicted it'd be something like this. When I prompted Bennett for her opinion, she replied that she had guessed that something like this might happen. Well, I did feel like we were being led around halfway through. I mean, we were way off track. I figured that the guide was at least scheming something and the end result was what had just happened. We ended up foolishly getting caught in some obvious trap. You did well until now. We don't need you anymore. Wait. Please wait. It was just a PAS.SING impulse. I won't do it anymore. I'll guide you. I'll be submissive. I'll even lick the bottom of your feet. Mercy. Those were the last words he spoke. Even though there was some distance between them, Bennett executed a forward flicking motion from some distance away. Matching that motion, the head of the guide splattered into a fine mist. Oh, how grotesque. So, what now? With the way things are, we don't even know if the path until this point has been correct. Well, we can only continue forward until we figure it out. Even if it's wrong, we can just turn back. By the way, Moffel, have you been mapping until this point? Yeah, more or less. When I was questioned by Bennett, I took out a piece of paper from my pocket. The path we had taken until this point had been mapped. I mean, even considering how I acted, I had the Ranger CLA.S.S. The floor plan drawn using the Ranger skill resulted in maps which had no equal when it came to precision. The map which had been composed perfectly recorded the layout of the castle. But that map had been turned into ashes. Me, Bennett and the clothes that we were wearing would not even need to care for such a measly electric current. However, the material that I had been using to map our path was just an ordinary piece of paper. Naturally, a piece of paper would not be able to endure a lightning current. I should probably think like this, you know. Yeah, this was the point where, rather than thinking about my carelessness, I should be praising the amazing plan that the enemy executed. Yeah, that guide was someone with amazing resourcefulness or foresight. To think that they would be able to ruin the mapping that I had been undertaking until now. Anyways, shall we get going? Oi, aren't you at least going to bother making an excuse? Don't worry about the small details. Let's just get out of the trap first. Even though it's just single-digit damage, our HP is being shaved away by a single digit's worth. You still have that same old irresponsible and sloppy personality. I hear nothing. People became mature by continuously making mistakes. There was no reason for one mistake to hold you back. We crossed the bridge and got out of the electric current trap. We then decided to go forward for now. In the end, we were met with nothing but a dead end. Although we had already predicted it, it turned out the path we were taking was actually a wrong route. Can't be helped, let's turn back. Why don't we just go on a rampage inside the castle? They might come out and meet us instead. Let's leave that as our final resort. It shouldn't be that much of a problem to look around a bit more. After chit-chatting for a bit, we returned back to the bridge and got back to the prior path after having the current run through us once again. Although it was not painful, I wondered if we could do something about my hair being messed up a little from the running current. Using my fingers as a comb, I ran them through and combed my hair all the while we were going back to the previous paths. When we got there, there was an appearance of a female demon looking exasperated. She had wavy brown-colored hair and wore a plain-looking gray robe. She was also of a higher level than most other demons. Needless to say, she was not enough to be Bennett's or my enemy. I've been told already, but, what a monster you guys are. To come and go across the electric current trap as if it's the most natural thing in the world, that thing has the same power as live lightning, you know. And you are. I am one of the 7 luminaries, Saturnus of the Earth. I have no hostile intentions. To begin with, it wouldn't even be a battle. I have been ordered by the Demon King Sama to guide the 2 of you to him. Ah, I see. The 7 luminaries, huh. No wonder her level was slightly higher than the others. Anyways, since she was offering to guide us, we might as well accept the offer. I decided to let her guide us without objection. When I turned to look at Bennett to see what she thought, she nodded, suggesting that she was of the same mind. Appreciate it. We'll be relying on you. Are you not going to doubt me? It might turn out to be a trap, you know. If it turns out to be a trap, at that time, it'll result in nothing more than you dying. Bennett replied in such a way, but in truth, it was not as if I was completely incautious. Even at this very moment in time, I had one of the Ranger CLA.S.S's skills Trap Search Level 1 activated 6. When this skill was activated, at set intervals, the user's SP would be consumed. In exchange, the skill would detect traps for the user. This skill could go as high as level 5, and naturally, the higher the level of the skill, the more intricate of a trap that it would be able to detect and the worse the SP consumption became. The skill that I had activated, Trap Search Level 1, had the effect of detecting only traps which would result in instant death. As a result, the user would be assaulted by other traps one after another. In games, as long as the player did not die, everything else was as good as irrelevant. After all, if a player did not die, they could recover one way or another and all would be well. As such, the skill was only activated up to level 1 to reduce the consumption of resources, whilst progressing forward without a care in the world regardless of how many traps they were to end up triggering. This was the basic strategy of high-level players for conquering dungeons. In truth, when the players reached a high level, it would be much faster and far more efficient to purposefully trigger the traps rather than bother with disarming every single trap that they came across. The higher the level of the individual, the higher the level of search skill they would be able to use. Yet, as the individual's level beam higher, the more they would not require the search skill. It was a horribly balanced scenario. After walking around the castle for a while, we came to stand before a steel gate giving off an enormous amount of presence. Correction, rather than the door, it was from the individual which was on the other side of the gate. Now, please enter. Saturnus said so and then slowly opened the gate. Chapter 153, The Laws of Physics is Storing Energy, 1 Raw link, January 22, 2017, Translator, Tumorfreethoughts/TPSTT, February 11, 2020, Editor 1, Hand of Vecna, March 28, 2020, Editor 2, Key, April 2, 2020, Translation link, __notice 1, for those that haven't noticed it. The release schedule is posted on the side of the page /on Discord. Dates are just ETA and not fixed. The schedule may also change without notice, but it's a good indication of when the chapter will arrive. Notice 2, ilu.s.trations up on the Discord. A.s. Sign yourself the required role. Author note, Trap Search Level 0, acquired from the start. It is able to detect relatively weak traps. Extremely low SP consumption. Trap Search Level 1 can be acquired at Level 5. It is only able to detect instant death traps with a high detection rate. Low SP consumption. Even though you acquire this skill early in the game, there is no use for it at that point in the game. Trap Search Level 2, finally a skill which is practical. Can be acquired at Level 15. The effect of the skill is dependent on the user's stats. It is able to detect a majority of the traps, but the detection rate is quite low. If a ranger has not at least learned this skill, then they are not even worth talking about. Low SP consumption. Trap Search Level 3, stronger version of Level 2. The effects are enhanced. Can be acquired at Level 30. Moderate SP consumption. Trap Search Level 4, stronger version of Level 3. The effects are enhanced. Can be acquired at Level 50. High SP consumption. For someone like Ruppaz or Fekta, this version is more than enough. Although it is not impossible for the skill to fail to detect a trap, the possibility of that happening is lower than winning a Division 1 jackpot from a lottery. Trap Search Level 5, stronger version of Level 4. The effects are enhanced. Can be acquired at Level 100. High SP consumption. At this point, unless the user's stats are extremely low, it will not fail to detect a trap. Trap Master, able to detect all traps. Success in detecting a trap is guaranteed regardless of the user's stats. Because the SP consumption rate is so high, only absurdly strong individuals are able to use it. On the other hand, if they are absurdly strong individuals, level 4 or 5 would be enough. They would not fail to detect a trap at that point. Can be acquired at level 200. It is a wasteful skill. Fekta, Trap Master activated. I can see through any trap with this skill. Oh, there's a poison arrow trap right there. I'm going to disarm it, so please wait for a buy Rupas, too bothersome. Progresses forward. Trap activated. The effect of the poison is nullified due to equipment, 1 damage suffered. Rupas, right, let's keep going. Fekta. Author note end, __. After being guided by the one who represented Earth within the 7 luminaries, we arrived at a room which was S.P.A. size enough to be able to accommodate around 100 people. Looking around from the entrance, there was a throne. The Demon King was sitting on it, looking the exact same as the last time I had seen him. After noticing our intrusion into the room, he raised his head to look towards us, then spoke to Saturnus. You did well. You may fall back. Understood. After being told to do so by the Demon King, Saturnus hurriedly left the room. What confidence he had, not keeping any guards with him. Although I supposed it was possible that he knew there was no meaning in keeping a guard with him. However, even if that were the case, since he would be dealing with the 2 of us by himself, it would not be wrong to conclude that he possessed quite a bit of confidence. Once the Demon King saw us, he smiled faintly and then slowly stood up. He then moved the table which was at the corner of the room to the center, then sat on the accompanying chair. Are you not going to sit on the throne? That's just there so I can maintain my majesty when my subordinates come into the room. I mean, there's no way I would ordinarily be sitting there all the time when it's my own room. He does have a point there. Well, but, at least in that case, sit on your throne when you're having an audience with a guest. Why is the throne even in your personal room anyways? In any event, Bennett and I also sat down on a chair and faced the Demon King. Well, the whole situation was truly surreal. After all, we were sitting on improvised chairs looking at each other whilst ignoring the throne in the last boss's personal room. I believe I'm already aware of why the 2 of you are here. You must be looking for Dina, am I right? Since you know that name, it would mean that. Yes, I already knew about her background from the very beginning. Including her goal. He had just casually said something outrageous, but it was something that was predictable if one thought about it a little. To begin with, since she was pulling the strings so blatantly in front of the Demon King's eyes and under his nose, there was no way he could not have noticed anything. Furthermore, if one were to consider that he had not made a single attempt to rebuke her, it would mean that he was acting in concert with her as her accomplice. Of course, it was not impossible that the Demon King was simply blind and oblivious, but that line of thought could no longer be considered an option now. I see. In that case, it would mean that you were also aware of the fact that she was the G.O.Dis's avatar. That's right. Does that mean you are on the G.O.Dis's side? The farces that were the heroic tales had occurred countless times in this world in the past. And the main characters who had enlivened all of that were said to be Pollux and this guy. Pollux acted the role of the righteous and led the heroes around. This guy acted the role of the villain and fought with the heroes. He would pretend to be defeated and land a fatal hit on the hero, creating a scene where the world would appear to be saved by the beautiful and N.O.Bly sacrifice of the hero. Then, once everyone forgot about what had happened, he would once again appear as if he knew nothing of history and terrorist the world whilst adopting a different name. I see, truly a farce. It was nothing but a badly written play auth.o.r.ed by a child. However, one of the actors who was enacting the scene felt disgusted by this farce from the bottom of her heart and left the G.O.Dis's side. So what about this guy? Was he still on the G.O.Dis's side? Or did he feel equally disgusted by the play just like Pollux? Well, the answer did not even require me to ask about it. Is that what you think? No, not at all. In response to the Demon King's sarcastic remark, I answered back honestly. Exactly, I was aware that he had long estranged himself from the G.O.Dis. If that was not the case, he would never have disclosed such disadvantageous information about the G.O.Dis to me. What I could not understand was why he had left Dina, who was the G.O.Dis's avatar, alone to her own devices. At that time, when he was about to inform me of the information, the one to hinder him was Dina too. As such, it was only natural to conclude that Dina was on the G.O.Dis's side. Yet, he did not rebuke her even in relation to that matter. After all, even after that incident, he had left Venus alone. Those were the points which were incomprehensible to me. Furthermore, even now, I was still unable to ascertain what his goals were. Do you mind me asking? The reason as to why you left the G.O.Dis's side. I don't particularly have a special reason. I just simply got bored of it. The Demon King rested his chin on his hand and smiled as he narrowed his eyes. I simply got bored with having to purposefully lose according to a predetermined arrangement, even though I have sufficient power to conquer the world. Would you not say that it's only natural for a person to want to move the scenario with their own hands every once in a while? I merely gave priority to my urge to rule the world, that's all. Is that really how it is? That's right. There's no other reason. He laughed out loud daringly. The appearance of him oozing with his own desire at that point was truly befitting the king of demons who stood as the enemy of all humanoids. But I wonder why. I really don't believe that's his true reason. If anything, to me, he's like a clown who's acting to hide his true thoughts. I still don't know what that true reason is, but I feel like he's trying to protect something or someone. That's what my intuition is saying. The thing that he might be trying to protect, even at the cost of having to go against the G.O.Dis. The underlying reason behind why he wanted to avoid the loss as prearranged by the script. Could it be? By the way, that boy called Terra. You've got a pretty exceptional son, eh? A son of a demon. A phenomenon which shouldn't have existed. I'm truly embarrassed. Said. 3. I directed the topic towards Terra to test the waters, however, there was no change in the Demon King's expression. At the very least, it seemed that something of this degree was not enough to shake him. Whilst I observed him very carefully, I spoke as if I was interested in all of this. Your eyes seem a lot clearer than the last time I met you. Looks like you've regained a lot more of yourself. Thanks in part. Well, thanks to this one, Bennett, poking me a little, I woke up. But not completely. You're exactly right. The fact that I can still perceive myself as me, or... That was the absolute indication that Rupa's Moffel had not resurrected. Even at this point, I was still yet to be able to display half of the power that I had in my prime. Having said that, I did not feel like I would lose to most of the enemies. At this very moment, the only possible individuals that I might lose to were Bennett, the 5 Ouroboroses, the G.O.Dis, and the Demon King who was right in front of me. I'll look forward to the time we fight in the future. Is there really a need for us to fight? Of course. I'm going to say this now, but you shouldn't think of the enemy's enemy as your ally. It's true that I've rebelled against the G.O.Dis. But I haven't capitulated to you. The world doesn't need 2 overlords. From the moment that you and I both strive to reign supreme, we were fated to fight with each other for the dominance of the world. The dominance of the world, huh? Even though you say that, the progression in your conquest is nothing but sloppy. If he had been serious, the area of his dominance would already have been much larger. And depending on how things had turned out, he and Bennett could have directly confronted one another and one of them should already be dead. Considering that things had not turned out that way, it suggested that he had not gotten serious. With that as the basis, I could not help but think that he had some other goal in mind. As if prolonging the process itself was his goal. I could not help but think in that way. If that's the case, why don't we just finish everything up right here and now? If you want, I will be your opponent, Bennett, who had not been aiding in the conversation and had only been watching over us, cut in from the side and prompted. At the same time, the atmosphere inside the room intensified and cracks started running in the window GLA.S.SES. In response to this, whilst the Demon King did not change his posture, it was apparent that he had also heightened his battle spirit. An ordinary person would have had difficulty breathing just by being around us. I received a message for you from Dina. In that stiff and dense atmosphere, the Demon King S.H.I plusfted the topic of the conversation seemingly in a purposeful manner. He was most likely suggesting that he did not have the intention to fight yet. In a practical sense, if he were to engage in battle right now, he would have to fight both Bennett and I, so it was very unlikely for him to win. It could be said that it was wise of him to try and avoid the battle. Additionally, I was sure that Bennett would also not wish to win via a 2-on-1 setup. After the Demon King failed to play along with her provocation, she retracted her hostility after looking disappointed and bored. She said, "I will be waiting for you at the very first location where we met, that is within my lady's memory." The very first location we met, did you say? In response to receiving her message for me, I unwittingly questioned him. I remembered the location where we first met. It was at the Moffel Tower. That was where I met Dina, and that was when everything began. However, we had already searched the Moffel Tower, yet she was not there. Then where? Where exactly was Dina talking about? Unable to figure it out, I could only remain silent. I see. Thanks for the hospitality. It seemed Dina was not here. Nevertheless, we had certainly obtained a hint. The location at which we met for the very first time, that was within my memory, huh? I did not even have a shred of a clue as to the answer, but it would all be fine if I took this into consideration from now on. And for this particular matter, I could not rely on someone else's knowledge. After all, the answer was only within my memory. Are we going now? Yeah. Based on the fact that she left a clue, it seems that she's unexpectedly someone that doesn't like being lonely. It was a message from Dina. Even though she was hiding away herself, she was telling us to quickly find her. It was just as if she was a child who was playing a game of hide and seek, and even though she was very good at hiding, she wanted people to quickly find her. Thinking in such a way, I felt that the whole situation was a little weird. As expected, it seemed that even though I was being led around, my inner disposition was unable to hate her. I see. The next time we meet will probably be after everything has been brought out into the open. Probably. The Demon King smiled as if he was in a smiling compet.I. Similarly, I smiled back in order to match his expression. The next time we meet, I was sure it would not be this heartwarming. In all likelihood, the next time we met, there would be a battle. Both the Demon King and I understood that. But that was exactly why we were smiling right now. Well, see you later. ORM. Yeah, later, Ruppaz. After saying that, I stood up from the chair and Bennett followed suit. By the looks of it, she was considerably bored, as she was showing an expression which seemed relieved that it was finally over. Once we returned to the entrance of the castle, the warriors which were guarding the gate opened the way for us by splitting away to the sides whilst trembling in fear. Subsequently, we opened the gate in the same way that we previously did and left. So do you have some place in mind? For now, let's try going back to Moffel Tower. Maybe we missed something there. After being asked by Bennett, even whilst feeling that we would draw the wrong straw, I suggested the name of a location that we had already searched once. In practice, I simply could not recall any other location which would qualify as the location where I first met Dina. The very first thing that I saw when I got to this world was the throne of Leavition. However, Dina was not at that location. After that, I took flight for the first time and went to the tower. That was where I first met her. Yeah, however much I rewind and think about it, our first meeting was at Moffel Tower. There's no other place. It would be nice if there's another hint lying around somewhere. I set the destination of Argo as Moffel Tower and we returned to the domains of the humanoids once again. Asterisk around this time, Ruppaz-sama is probably searching the Moffel Tower. With fluttering blue hair, a young girl, Dina muttered to herself with a warm smile. Every time she walked, the people in the surroundings took a moment and unwittingly turned back to look at her. Although part of the reason was due to her beauty, the biggest reason was the color of her hair. The hair color for 90% of people on the street was black. There were the occasional individuals who had dyed their hair brown or blonde, but nevertheless, the real color of their hair was still all black. There was not a single human being who had natural blue hair like Dina. To begin with, it was simply impossible to get natural blue hair as there was no genetic makeup for it. Under common sense, blue hair was something which did not exist outside of cosplay. Yet she continued to walk whilst disregarding everyone's line of sight being drawn to her and recalled a time from 200 years ago. At that time, she was still a doll. Without possessing an ego of her own, she believed that she was a clone and a personification of the G.O.Dis who walked the grounds of the world. She believed that the name Dina was nothing more than a name given to her by her parents who were used in the process of creating an avatar and that her real name was Alovenus. In truth, she was a bona fide avatar of the G.O.Dis and even inherited the G.O.Dis's memories and personality. As such, it was not wrong to think in that way. As such, she did not perceive or recognize herself as herself. The time that it all came crumbling down was 200 years ago. To be specific, it was 201 years ago. 1 year prior to when the Seven Heroes' betrayal took place. That was the moment she perceived and recognized herself as herself. That was the time when she was truly born into this world. And at this moment, without a doubt, she was moving according to her own will. She deviated from the G.O.Dis scenario based on her will, but only to the extent where she would absolutely not be noticed by the G.O.Dis. As for what exactly her goal was, or who exactly it was for, no one other than her knew. Was it perhaps for the sake of Ruppas? Was it perhaps for the sake of the G.O.Dis? Or perhaps neither of them but for her own benefit? Again, no one knew. Boxes of steel ran on maintained roads. Shops which displayed and adorned various signs were CLU.S. tiered together. High-rise buildings, which stood tall into the sky as if they were trying to reach the heavens, were lined up next to each other. A young girl walked down the middle of the street in J.A. which was packed with students and salarymen heading to work, hustling into the crowd until, eventually, she could no longer be found. Author note, Earth, please, mercy. I am not like Midgard and the laws of physics are properly doing their jobs. The laws of physics are going to perish just by the act of you guys walking, so seriously, please don't. Laws of physics, is it my turn? Chapter 154, Ruppas used teleport, 1 raw link, January 28, 2017, translator, Tumorfreethoughts/TPSTT, February 14, 2020, editor 1, Hand of Vecna, March 31, 2020, editor 2, Key, April 7, 2020, translation link, __TLN, apologies for the low quality translation. This chapter's explanation/a.n.a.logis were a little difficult to translate and I took forever trying to figure out how to word it. Hopefully, it still makes sense and I didn't butcher it too much. As we are almost at the climax of the main storyline, the seemingly useless information in this chapter is actually quite important, so please let me know if it doesn't make sense. What should I do? I can't find any clues whatsoever. We searched every nook and cranny of Moffel Tower, however, we spectacularly found nothing. I thought that there would at least be a single note left somewhere, but there really was absolutely nothing. Now that it had gotten to this, I really had no clue. Without a doubt, the first location where I had met Dina was here. So if there's nothing in this place, where am I supposed to look? Oi, Moffel. Are you sure you don't have any ideas? Unfortunately, I really don't. What a problem it's turned out to be. I'm not sure about the details, but, isn't that one called Dina supposed to be the G.O.Dis's avatar? In that case, couldn't she have used some kind of memory manipulation technique to convey and leave a message that only you could understand? If that wasn't the case, she wouldn't have specifically added that is within your memory. Even if you tell me that. Bennett suggested a consideration on the matter, however, I really did not know what I did not know. Even if I was told that it was within my memory, the very first location that I could recall where I met Dina was, without a doubt, the very place that we were in. If I were to go back any further in time, I would no longer be Ruppas, but be me, or... I first saw the figure of Alovenus in the game on my screen, then I was led to this world, and... Oh. A voice leaked out of me without me meaning to. Wait, hang on. Just wait a minute? That's right. The very first location where I met Dina wasn't in this world. It was in the other world. It was on Earth, in J.A.Pan. In my, own room before I became Ruppaz. Right in front of my computer's screen. At that time, I set Dina as an object within the Maffel Tower. Was that what she meant? In other words, that she was not in Midgard, but on the Earth? If that was truly the case, indeed, it would absolutely be a location where no one other than me would notice. Sorry, I just thought of one. Ho? Where is it? It's in another world. Huh. There was an expression that said what the H.E.L.L is she saying, written all over Bennett's face. Furthermore, even on my own end, I did not say it with much conviction. Nonetheless, factoring in that we could not find her anywhere even after thoroughly searching the Maffel Tower, that was the only place I could think of. Exactly, Dina had to be on Earth. She was in J.A.Pan and, in all likelihood, at the house that I, was previously living in. Even if she was not there specifically, she should be somewhere nearby. Additionally, I also had a method of reaching that place. If I used Xgate, it should be possible to bypass the S.P.A.C time continuum and PAS.S over to the other side. In reality, the young boy SEI had already been summoned here through that method. If anything, perhaps I should have done this sooner. Even if just to investigate my background from the roots, I should have crossed over to the other side at least once too, and the reason behind why I had not done that yet could probably be attributed to the fact that I myself had not wanted to unveil the truth. In all likelihood, I was fearful of learning the truth more than anyone else. There's another world independent of this world that is called Earth. If Dina were to be somewhere, that's most likely where she is. Another world, huh? Good, this sounds fairly interesting. There might be some individuals with decent backbones over there. No, there isn't. I'm begging you not to go berserk over there. Bennett laughed belligerently as if she was ready for a fight, but I remonstrated her. Although I did feel bad for her, there was absolutely no one in the other world who would be able to fight against Bennett. The physical capabilities of the people on Earth were shockingly frail. It was because they had evolved and adapted to living in a progressively advanced civilization with convenient lifestyles. You might have often heard this line before. That, if one were to compare a human being of the past and a human being from modern times, it would give rise to a difference in strength and stamina. People now lived in comfortable living S.P.A.ces where one could adjust the room temperature. Their modes of transportation were bicycles, buses and trains. Not only that, it was not even rare for there to be people who did not leave their houses all day long unless they suddenly gained the motivation to exercise. These were the signs of peace and prosperity made possible only because Earth had advanced beyond Midgard. Even the greatest nation in the world, America, which boasted the strongest military force, was more famous for asserting ridiculous things such as pizzas are vegetables, and undergoing an obesity crisis. As such, it was only natural that the physical capabilities of the people on Earth had dropped to a deplorable state. They were simply incomparable to the people in Midgard. Even when human warriors were compared to each other, the modern counterparts fell short of the warriors of the past. Also, pizzas are not vegetables 3. Although this was purely my speculation, even the so-called world champion in that world would not Serpa.S. level 5 in this world. From what I've heard in the past, the bones of human beings on Earth were structured in such a way that it would be impossible for them to lift anything weighing over 500 kilograms. In contrast, this world was just a mess. As long as an individual raised their level, they would be able to lift anything regardless of the weight. Whilst I had never exerted my full strength, at the very least, I had enough arm strength to throw the Dragon King away with a single hand, so I was substantially weird myself. The misgiving in all of this was most likely the laws of physics. In Midgard, perhaps because the G.O.dis fired the laws of the physics sen or whatever, it was not doing its job at all. Even if Bennett or I were to go at a speed fast enough to lap around Midgard in a single second, everything would most likely remain fine. However, if such a thing were to be attempted on Earth, there would no doubt be a major catastrophe. In the worst-case scenario, that alone would be enough to erase all life on Earth. Once we crossed over to that world, battles had to be absolutely avoided. For argument's sake, even if we were to engage in a battle, if we did not substantially hold back, it would result in an extremely bad situation. Although this exposition had gotten quite long, in summary, if Bennett were to rampage in that world, Earth would be in danger. In the worst-case scenario, let alone Earth, that whole universe would be in danger. I'm going to ask just in case, but are you planning to come along? That's my intention. In that case, I'm going to request that you stay calm and collected. And whatever you do, don't move around as you do in Midgard, even if it's by mistake. What do you mean? I had knowledge about both worlds. As such, I could understand how dangerous and horrible of an idea it would be for us to move around with all our might. On the other hand, Bennett only had knowledge of this world. In other words, her common sense told her that the world would still be perfectly fine even if she ran around seriously. If I did not revise her understanding of that first, I would be too fearful to take her over to the other side. As such, I casually activated one of the grappler's skills, S.H.I+NE blow, and fired it in a random direction at that moment, for this skill was one of the available skills that had an absolute accuracy effect. Just as the name of the skill would suggest, the fist was struck out at light speed, thereby giving no room for the enemy to avoid the attack and allowing the user to absolutely hit the enemy. Furthermore, the speed of light was not absolute, but instead relative. For example, if I were to compress time and use the skill in a world where the speed of light was about 10%, S.H.I+NE blow would be activated at the speed of light as I perceived it. In other words, the fist would be thrown at a speed far faster than the actual speed of light. From that random shot that I had fired, the ground in front of me got scr.a.ped away to the horizon as if it was scooped up by a spoon, but that was all there was to it. The world itself around us was still perfectly fine. Putting things simply, if an attack like that was fired on the other side, the world would perish. Well, I mean, if you punched the planet with all your might, I suppose it'd end up like that. That's not what I'm saying. It doesn't matter where you shoot it, a person will, or more like, the moment anything with sufficient ma.s.spas.ses the speed of light, it'll all be over. Sure, the part about shockwaves being created due to something moving is also the same in this world, but the scale at which it happens is completely different. Let alone the speed of light, you have to understand that just by pas.sing the speed of sound, there could be a major disaster. Furthermore, there's a theory that not only the planet but the whole universe could perish if something were to travel faster than the speed of light. Although I'm not too sure about the details. How fragile can that world be? What is even up with the world parries H.I+NG from a punch that doesn't even hit? Although Bennett Nash replied as such whilst sounding exasperated, the one which was strange was not the other side but the world that we were in. It was only because the world we were in was so nonsensical that people like me and Bennett were able to fight to our fullest extent. Should that not have been the case, we would most likely have had to seal our own powers, which had become overly powerful. If anything, the part which we needed to pay attention to was making sure that we did not unintentionally kill off the people living in that world. Without it coming across as some kind of a joke, the people in that world could very well end up dead just from our shoulders bumping into them. For the human beings in that world, Bennett and I were like a certain plumber with a red hat with an invincible star buff which lasted for an indefinite amount of time. 5 So yeah, as insurance, I need you to wear this. I'll also put the same thing on. I activated X-Gate and connected it to Moffel Tower. I then took out 2 bracelets, throwing one to Bennett and putting the other one on my arm. 6 It was a limited equipment called Infinity, which was distributed only to players who had predict.I.P.aided in a special event. It was a broken piece of equipment whereby the effect of the item was to make all the skills used by the wearer cost only 1 SP. Although it would not be infinite uses, since the skills cost practically nothing, the wearer became able to use skills for effectively no cost, thereby allowing them to fire skills off continuously. However, the corresponding demerit was quite detrimental. When the bracelet was equipped, every status was reduced to 10% of the original value. As a consequence, the practical use of the bracelet in actual combat was low. The only usage of this bracelet was to equip it during preparation for a battle to spam cast skills and buffs, then change equipment right before the actual combat began. However, rather than taking such troublesome steps, as it was faster to use skills normally and recover by using items, there was no practical use for the bracelet unless the individual wanted to save items. In either event, our status was now down to triple digits. If it was now, perhaps even the 7 luminaries would be able to put up a good fight. Also, let's match our clothing to what's on the other side as well. Our current appearances would be equivalent to cosplaying if we went to the other side now. As was the case, it was probably better that I crafted some clothing which would match the people on the other side. Bennett and I returned to the Argo and got changed after I crafted a new set of clothing. Although it was a bit painful to have to lose the beneficial effects of the equipment that we were currently wearing, as expected, it would be problematic to be wandering around the middle of AJ.A. Pain City in a fancy dress. Even the clothing that I had received from Migraz gave off a fantasy design, therefore, it was not very suitable for the other side. On this specific point, the dress S.H.I plus RT and skirt that Bennett was wearing might have possibly been viable for use, however, I decided to have her change just in case. Well, yeah, I guess this should be fine. These clothes have quite a weird design, huh? Looking at my own reflection in the mirror, I was feeling satisfied now that I looked like the people on the other side. My getup consisted of a red hoodie and a pair of jeans. By the way, the hoodie that I was wearing was the type with a pocket in the front. Don't say that it looks lame. It's the lameness that makes it good. Additionally, it was nice for moving around casually. Or rather, the dress that I was usually wearing was just too hard to move around in. Due to the beneficial effect that it gave and its durability, I still wore it. However, with that dress on, it was really hard to use a kicking technique. My hair was tied up in a ponytail and I no longer wore a fake pair of GLA.S.SES. After all, I doubted that there was anyone who knew my face on that side. Bennett did not look very different from how she usually looked with a white dress S.H.I plus RT and a black skirt. She now wore tights underneath the skirt. Well, she nonchalantly kicked around even with a short skirt on. After all, it was something that I needed to worry about, you know? And lastly, on top, she wore a long black coat. That was the summary of her getup. Now then, shall we begin? I got up onto the deck of the Argo and gathered arcane power in my right hand and divine power in my left hand. I then mashed the two powers together to make them repel each other. The resulting reaction bore a hole in the S.P.A.C time continuum. And lo and behold, in front of me, an X-gate big enough to allow people to pass through was completed. Typically, we would use this skill to go from one place to another within Midgard, but this time would be different. Deeper and deeper, a hole was dug into the world known as Midgard. No, a hole was opened in the very universe itself and eventually broke through the world itself. It was on the other side of a completely separate universe. That was where the Earth existed. There was no need to figure out the coordinates. After all, the place where this Midgard existed was also the solar system. There was the Sun, the Moon, the planet Venus, the planet Mars and others. In other words, it had the same coordinates. The Earth existed in exactly the same place as Midgard. If I were to be more specific, I should say, it was on the opposite side of Midgard. I did not know which side was heads and which side was tails, but long story short, the Earth could be reached as long as I could cross over the universe. And the reason behind why I knew about all of this information, which I normally should not have been aware of, was most likely because she had left this information in me. Let's go, Bennett. I stuck my hand out to Bennett and she stared at it in puzzlement. What's that hand for? Doesn't matter, just take it. X-gate requires the consent of the other party. If you reject the transfer halfway through, you'll end up in a boundary between the two worlds. So if you reject it at this point, I'll judge that it's impossible to take you along, and I'll go alone. Bennett placed her hand on top of mine whilst looking reluctant to do so, and then quickly turned her head away. Do you really hate holding hands with me that much? Well, whatever, I was not going to mention anything at this point. I mean, after all, she was someone who was originally hostile towards me, so if anything, her taking my hand must mean that she was trying to be amicable with me. Whilst being sent off by the Argos crew who were telling us to take care, I pulled Bennett's hand along and leapt into the X-gate, heading to the opposite side of the world. We traveled far, far deeper than we would ordinarily ever have gone. By traveling in the boundary of S.P.A.ce that one would never be able to reach by physical means, we were able to experience the existence of arcane power and divine power which overflowed the world in a way that would not be possible otherwise. In all likelihood, in an originally empty S.P.A.ce, arcane power overflowed to materialise substances. Those substances were then likely enhanced by divine power, turning into real tangible objects. It was a G.O. daily technique of creating something from nothing through the act of combining arcane power and divine power in a way that was impossible for us to achieve 7IC. So it turns out arcane power and divine power are actually the same form of power. It was nothing more than dividing the power of creation into plus and minus. It was said throughout Midgard that arcane power was the power to materialize something that did not exist and divine power was the power to enhance something that already existed. But the truth was different. It turned out arcane power was the power to create something from nothing and divine power was the power to strengthen that something so that it would remain as that something permanently. Midgard was composed and held together by those two powers. That was why, when one forcibly mashed the divine and arcane power together, it would repel the power which held the world together in that specific area, causing a hole to form. As a simple explanation, it was something like overwriting data which already existed. If there was data which already existed in that place and the exact same data was brought on top of it, the data would be overwritten. At the moment the overwriting happened, the previous data would be squashed by the new data and disappear. Needless to say, although the new data would take root in that location, at the very moment the process took place, there was a temporary state where nothing existed. So in summary, X-gate was something like overwriting a part of the world and utilizing a blank state which was given birth until the moment the overwriting was completed to create a shortcut. In other words, the world that we were inhabiting until now, the whole universe itself was Alovenus's arcane magic. What I could not understand was why the living creatures within it were also not created by her arcane magic. Although the whole world itself was made out of her arcane magic, the people living within it were substantive. Needless to say, we were also not given birth by arcane magic. After all, if that was not the case, I would have long been erased by her. Of course, I was under the influence of mana and had even been mutated due to it, but we were still different from the demon race. In other words, it meant that Alovenus created a world through her arcane and divine magic and allowed real living creatures with actual substance to inhabit it. And although this was just my speculation, those living creatures were brought over from Earth. That was why there was a strange sense of congruity in the ecosystem between Earth and Midgard to an unnatural extent. But why was it like that? Could it possibly be that she did not have the power to create life even though she had sufficient power to even create a universe itself? Could it possibly be that she brought over real life from outside because she could only create incomplete dolls like the demons? What's wrong, Moffel? No, nothing. Just then, I was imagining something truly terrifying. It was a line of thinking that I hoped would not be correct. At the same time, there was a bitter feeling within myself. The more one hated the idea, the more often it came into fruition. And I was most likely spot on. Alovenus. Could it be that she's actually not the creation G.O.dis? Could it be that the truth is just the opposite? Whilst thinking like that, I started to break out into a cold sweat. Author note, by the way, I will give away one spoiler to answer the question of whether there is another mastermind behind Alovenus who just happens to be the true creator deity. Please rest assured that such a last boss will not just pop out of thin air. To the bitter end, the highest ranked deity of this world is Alovenus. That will not change and there is no stronger character than her. In the truest sense, this shoddy failure of AG.O.dis is the final antagonist and the strongest character. Are you saying that she doesn't have the necessary majesty or threat of the last boss, so you would prefer it if another boss that has an actual sort of majesty pops out even if it's out of thin air? It'll be fine, it'll be fine. Once we enter the final battle, she will properly show us strength worthy of the last boss. Her personality and her strength is a mismatch. Author note end, TP at email protected. Is that how the quantum state works? It's not right? Also, the evil G.O.D was sent flying to Earth from Midgard a few chapters ago. So that means, you can travel from Midgard to Earth through crossing the universe, but it's at the same coordinates if you use X-Gate? Not to mention the evil G.O.D was sent flying for years but also went back in time? O.O. Vecna, I think you're thinking too much. The author is probably just making things up by mess.h.I plus ng together different theories and hypotheses. Many worlds interpretation, https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/many-worlds_interpretation tachyon, https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/tachyon black hole as a wormhole, https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/black_hole number sign singularity. Chapter 155, Rupas used Payday, 1 raw link, January 29, 2017, translator, Tumorfreethoughts/tpstt, March 23, 2020, editor 1, Hand of Vecna, 2020// editor 2, Key, 2020// translation link, ______, author note, Laws of Physics San, yeehaw. It's finally the great me's turn to S.H.I plus NE. Laws of Fantasy, well, actually. Laws of Physics San, what, why? Laws of Fantasy, I came along with Rupas and Bennett. So they'll still be able to move around the way they've been doing up until now in Midgard, KK. 2 Laws of Physics, asterisk it's similar to the effects of the lunar robe from Night Wizard. They're bringing the laws of their world into another world 3Q, does that mean that even if they move at Mach velocity, it'd all be fine? Rupas and Bennett would be fine, but for everyone else except for the 2 of them, the laws of physics would still apply. Therefore, there would be a major catastrophe. Author note end, ___, by the looks of it, it's checkmate. Seems we were a little too slow in noticing it. At the summit of the Maffel Tower, a woman was sitting on the throne and muttered as if she had gotten tired of it all. Her eyes had no glimmer. There was no longer any of the brightness or cheeriness on the face of that girl as she once had as an adventurer when she was still young. She had believed that if she continued to kill her enemies, there would one day be peace. If it was for the sake of that peace, she would do anything that she needed to. By now, she was long used to being called a devil, a monster, or an inhumane person. But it seemed she had far underestimated the might of her own comrades. By being too overzealous and engrossed with what was in front of her, she failed to take notice of the discontent and unhappiness of the ones who were following behind her. The G.O.D utilized that very misgiving to her advantage, such that their hatred and loathing for the woman sitting on the throne had gotten to the point of no return. Perhaps the only one who was not affected and had not changed was the vampire princess alone. In respect of her willpower, which was unyielding like steel, the woman sitting down on the throne felt respect from the bottom of her heart. In contrast, it could be said that the other 6 individuals were not as strong-willed as the vampire princess. The fact that she was unable to take notice of that difference was perhaps a fault attributable to her on its own. What was happening now was an outcome resulting from choosing to abandon the thinking process under the guise of a convenient word known as trust. The eyes of the ones whom she called friends were now clouded with hatred and loathing. It had gotten to the point where any attempt at persuading them was likely to be rendered futile. Although on the surface, they were still being subservient to her, she knew that, behind the scenes, they were steadily preparing for insurrection. Furthermore, she had already ascertained and was aware of the fact that more than half of those in her army held the same opinion as them and were gleefully waiting for that to happen. It isn't a checkmate yet. If it's you, it should very well be possible to completely turn the tables around and start all over again. Yeah, it's possible. But you know, Ophiuchus, even a.s. summing that I end up winning, what would happen then? Who exactly in their right minds do you think would end up following a ruler who massacres her own friends and allies? After all, a ruler who kills over half of her own subordinates is nothing but a tyrant. No one would recognize that individual. On top of that, once I do end up killing a lot of my allies and subordinates, even if I were to come out victorious, there'll be nothing left in my hands. Whether I win or not, I'll only end up losing everything. From the moment it had gotten to this point, it was my loss. The ruler with the black wings mocked herself and laughed cynically. She was sneering at herself for her own incompetence. Until now, if it was for the sake of world peace, she did not mind being labeled as an evil ruler. She believed it was fine for her enemies to consider her a terrifying slaughterer. But in the end, she was feared even by her own allies. She was told that she was unworthy to be a ruler. With how things had developed, she was no longer a ruler at all. She had become nothing more than a delusional fool who called herself a ruler. At the very least, the 12 stars will be left. And myself. You're right. I guess that's the only silver lining. The black-winged ruler faintly smiled and chuckled. At that point, she was feeling ever so thankful for her dearest loyal followers who remained under her even in this situation. And exactly because of that feeling, she thought that any further battle should not come to fruition. If she fought seriously, it was not a battle that she would not be able to win. If she really felt like it, it was possible for her to suppress everyone and massacre them all. However, heroes would not readily yield while they were roused under the influence of the G.O.Dis. If she was able to completely suppress everyone and everything through the use of coercion, she would have had an easy time. But the enemy would definitely be expecting coercion and recognize its threat. Therefore, one could be sure that they would have some kind of countermeasure against it. After all, it was not as if there were no skills or techniques which could render coercion ineffective. Coercion was by no means an unparalleled and undefeatable skill. Nevertheless, even if the heroes under the protection of the G.O.Dis all came assaulting her, there was no way she could lose. But among the 12 stars, there would most definitely be a fatality. For the sake of preventing that from happening, the most optimal solution was for her to promptly leave the stage. Alternatively, she could swiftly massacre Alioth and everyone else before the 12 stars could be defeated and it would be a problem solved, but she knew that she was unable to put that into practice. If she were to do so, it would mean that she was no longer herself but merely an empty she.l which had abandoned all emotion and sentiment. Looks like there's no other way but to think of a way to lose. A way to lose, did you say? Yeah. If what the people desire is for me to step down as ruler, then, I shall answer by granting it to them. I will stage the loss and investigate the one who caused all of that to happen in the meantime. That's. For you, it will most likely be a painful and audacious road. If you want to defect from me, now is the perfect time, you know. Even if she were to leave, she would not be blamed. The king was hinting this to her. However, in response, the young girl called Afiyukas merely smiled courageously. No thank you, Rapasama. I have no intention of going back to being a doll. Until I met you, I was nothing more than a doll that didn't possess an ego of my own. You were the one who turned me into me. In return for that, I'll fool even the G.O.Disama herself. Replying as such, a young blue-haired girl displayed her unwavering loyalty. During the very brief instance as said between the worlds, a strange memory ran through my head. In that memory, I was exchanging a conversation, but I wondered who exactly it was with. As if I was having a dream, the face that I saw was very hazy and I was unable to make out who it was. It was just that, recalling that blue hair, I could not help but associate it with the woman that I was currently chasing after. In any event, it seemed we were able to successfully cross over to the other world. I was no longer able to feel either arcane or divine power. This was a world devoid of any fantasy elements. A world ruled entirely by the laws of physics and science. Yet, it was a place far more developed as a civilization than the fantasy-filled Midgard. There were many high-rise buildings lined up next to each other. In a way, perhaps this was a place that was more fantasy-like than Midgard. In other words, this was Earth. And just now, Bennett and I had set our feet down on the land of J.A. So this is another world. Bennett Nash and Ruppes back in J.A. Pan Ilu.S. Tration from Albalite Novel Volume 7, Bennett muttered whilst she looked around the surroundings. As to be expected, it seemed that even for her, she could not help but be astonished by the sight of what she was seeing for the first time. There were steel boxes that were running on the road. The buildings that were lined up were mostly high-rise buildings. In public parks, children were playing without a shred of fear or any threat from magical beasts. Also, as a side note, the air was excessively dirty and polluted. It was a strange feeling. After all, even though there were convenient powers such as alchemy and arcane magic, Midgard was still stuck in the Middle Ages. Yet, this world where no such powers existed had progressed to this point. The people who were walking on the street stalled, looked in our direction and started whispering to each other discreetly. As to be expected, the color of our hair was quite conspicuous. Well, I supposed we did not look like J.A. Payne's people by any means. Well, whatever. I guessed that for now, I would check our current position. If we just casually loitered down the road, we were bound to find some information signs sooner or later. I would be able to determine where we were from that. As for visiting a police box, I wondered what I should do. It would have been fine to consider it as one of our options if the way I spoke was not permanently stuck in a haughty tone, for admittedly, seeing a blonde woman using the archaic first-person P.R.O. Now yo, haughtily in the J.A. Pan of this world would be far too strange. And to top it off, right now, we were unable to take out and verify our personal ident.I.ties. As such, in the worst-case scenario, we might get arrested under suspicion of being overstayed illegal foreigners. As expected, we should avoid the option of asking for directions at a police box. For now, let's follow the path down the road. There should be an information sign somewhere. I'm not quite sure what's happening, but I'll leave it up to you. As I walked down the road, I randomly picked up a rock and tried cruise.h.I+ng it. There was no difference in grip strength. My physical abilities were the same as when I was in the other world. I thought that perhaps it would give rise to a difference in physical capabilities across the worlds, however, it seemed that was not the case. In other words, even in this world, I would be able to move faster than the speed of sound and punch faster than the speed of light. It would even be possible to reach the moon with a single leap. However, if I were to attempt any of that in this world, it would cause major collateral damage on Earth. Therefore, I absolutely could not do it. As a precaution, we wore bracelets which greatly restricted our abilities. Notwithstanding that, it would still be more than very easy to annihilate a city or two by running at our full strength. So we had to be really mindful. As I was thinking such thoughts, Bennett was casually crossing a major road whilst ignoring traffic lights. As one could have expected, a truck which was coming down the road was sounding its horn as it closed in on her. Yet, even after seeing that, Bennett showed no indication of attempting to avoid the hit. Let alone that, she clenched her fist lightly and... Oi, hold it. I quickly grabbed Bennett's nape and pulled her back. Because I greatly held back the speed at which I pulled her, there was no collateral damage to the environment. Nevertheless, a few students who coincidentally saw my movement were standing in a daze. Oi, did you see that just now? I'm not imagining things, right? Yeah. That blonde lady just moved at an unbelievable speed just then. Or more like, isn't she too much of a beauty? Could she be an idol? From the looks of things, even the speed that I had just used was far too much. Well, whatever. There should not be a problem even if I left it be. With only so many of them, it would only end up as a strange happening of the day. It could be that some of them would post it on the internet, and whilst it might turn into a funny story, I doubted anyone would truly believe it. In the meantime, I left the place all the while holding on to Bennett. Hey, what are you doing? That's my line. What were you planning to do? That golem-like object was buzzing and charging towards me, so I was merely trying to make them realize their place. That's not a golem. It's a vehicle. And you were the one at fault for crossing the street while the traffic lights were red. In this world, there are strict and precise rules in place to determine whether a person or vehicle should cross the road. Traffic lights. That thing. The thing that's giving off 3 different colored lights. After this conversation, I explained traffic lights, roadways, and cars to Bennett. However, it was questionable whether she even understood half of the things that I had said. Halfway through, when we were talking about the blue light of the traffic lights, she suddenly said, "That's not blue but green, isn't it?" At this point, I was not sure how to reply back to her, but, really, I wondered why it was even called a blue light. 5. If I recalled correctly, it was something along the lines of, back in the olden days of J.A.Pan, all the colors were expressed through 4 colors, blue, red, white, and black, so it's vestiges of that or whatever. In any event, I wouldn't be able to stop monitoring Bennett, I mean, I really didn't know what she was going to end up doing. I was contemplating this as we continued to walk down the street, and what do you know? We ended up finding an information sign as I had expected. Our current location is Tokyo, The place that I, used to live in previously was Niigata, so it's unexpectedly close by. 6. If I recall correctly, it should be to the north side of Tokyo. So, if we continue to progress in that direction, it should work out in the end. But the problem we have is the mode of transportation. After all, I currently don't own any currency from this world. I do have things like jewels and gold in my possession, so there's an option to liquidate them, but as I recall correctly, doing those things require me to show my proof of ident.I.tai. So how should I go about things? Maybe we should just move around by jumping from the roof of one building to another? I mean, in all likelihood, we probably wouldn't be spotted that easily. But even if we could do that, it would be appropriate to have some money on hand, just in case. After all, I want to bring back some food from this world when I go back. Maybe I'll use that trash skill that I haven't used in a long time. Skill Money Getter. 7. This was one of the skills that a ranger could learn. It was a useless skill with the effect of allowing the user to find and pick up money during the battle. The amount of money that one could gain by using this skill only amounted to a smidgen, so it was too insignificant. Furthermore, as the user would be defenseless whilst the skill was active, it was often cancelled halfway after getting attacked by the enemy. Needless to say, if the skill was interrupted, the effect of the skill also ceased. The only time an individual might use this skill was when they had absolutely no money left. Yet even at such times, it would usually be resolved by selling some items that they had on hand. Therefore, in the end, there was no role for this skill to play. I also tried using the skill a few times right after I obtained it, but due to the lack of uses that the skill had, I quickly and decisively abandoned using it. The name of this skill was always brought up whenever there was a discussion about useless skills on forums and bulletin boards. Notwithstanding all of that, I supposed under the condition where one had no proof of ident.I.tai and no money whatsoever, it could be useful. I then used telekinesis to pick up a 500 yen coin from the ground and caught it. In a way, what I did just now was misappropriation, but let's not talk about that. I mean, if it was just this amount, I doubt most people would bother taking it to a police box. 8. Needless to say, 500 yen would be spent almost immediately. As such, there was a need to somehow increase what I now had. Fortunately, there was a slot machine shop nearby. 9. Honestly speaking, I wasn't actually familiar with them, but I thought it'd be fine one way or another. I'd show the might of my 9,280 luck stat that's ordinarily not being put to use. I temporarily took off the bracelet and walked into the store. Bennett's face grimaced due to how dirty and noisy the inside of the building was, but she did not show any indication of going wild. Well, I guessed regarding the noisiness, there were also gambling venues in the other world and it was not all that different. The outcome was we had overwhelming winnings. About halfway through, I also gave some coins to Bennett so that we could fully abuse our high luck stats to get as many jackpots as we could. After seeing the anime characters on the slot machines, there was quite an impressive and memorable situation where Bennett kept making straight man's retorts along the lines of "Isn't this guy's eyes way too big?" and "Isn't this guy's face way too big?" But for now, we had increased the amount of money that we had on hand to over 100,000 yen. Therefore, if it was just to buy random things here and there in this world, it should be enough. As we were planning to take off after re-equipping the bracelets, we heard a scream from some distance away. When we turned around to check what was happening, there was a truck heading right towards a young child's position at an intersection slightly away from us. The traffic light for the pedestrian's path was blue, green. In other words, the truck had to be the side which was ignoring the traffic light. Okay, you're in rush, we get it. I lightly kicked the ground below me and reached the intersection, then punched away the truck which was closing in on the young child. Well, I described it as punched away, but I only made it float slightly. Of course, I did not go to an extreme extent of sending the truck far away to prevent subsequent nuisance. After floating in the air for a few seconds, the truck landed back down on the ground safely. Even though the driver inside had lost consciousness, I confirmed that he was still alive. The driver was holding onto a smartphone. 11 That's dangerous. You're driving inattentively? This piece of S.H.I+T. Maybe I should have punched it a little harder. When I looked around, people were making a fuss and some of them even had their smartphones out and directed at us. S.H.I+T, I might have gone a bit too far. I slowly left the place, making sure that I did not go faster than the speed of sound, was what I'd say, but I supposed for normal people, it would look like super high speed, taking Bennett with me and jumping away from where we were. Oi, I thought you said not to cause an uproar. Sorry, I don't even have a retort to that. As if I was running away, or rather, I was, in fact, running away. I leapt from one roof of a building to another. Author note, money getter trash skill. All it does is find and pick up money that is lying around on the ground. Having said that, it's not like there's money lying around on the ground everywhere. Yet it still finds it. Maybe it's actually a skill that just teleports money that CLA.S.Sifida is not in the possession of anyone to a position near the user.